Hey everybody, BoatsDon'tSink, Connor here. Today I have, for the first time in a long while, a Weiss Schwartz video. Fujimi Fantasia Bunko has just come out in English, so I've got my sort of set overview here. Today I'm just going to start with my top 10 cards as usual, and then hopefully later this weekend or early next week I'll have some sample deck lists up. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump into the most error-filled, errata-prone set that we've ever seen in the game. Yeah. First up, my number 10 card is Demon King's Love. This is a 2-0 event counter. Become Delicious, Moe Moe Kyun. So you choose a trait of a character on your opponent's stage, and all of your opponent's characters lose that trait until end of turn. Very strange card. Pretty much the only thing like it in the game. It might remind some people of the Konosuba 1-0 Aqua backup, where you get to remove traits off your opponent's deck. But removing it off the field has some very interesting applications. The main things you're going to see are removing like trait-based bonuses. So like against Attack on Titan, you can remove core off of all your opponent's characters, and then Arm and Assist is not giving plus 2k and hexproof to all your opponent's characters. And at that point, you can bounce Mikasa's back to hand, or like anti-damage. Well, not anti-damage, but this set has a minus soul counter that chooses. So if you remove hexproof, if they like swing with one character and you remove their traits so they're no longer hexproof, then you can choose their other characters with the minus soul counter on the next attack. So that's a pretty neat application. You can use it on your own main phase as well. So against a deck like Goblin Slayer, say they have 5 Order characters in play, you can just play this event, remove Order, and now they can't play Gate Scroll against you anymore because they don't have 5 or more Order characters. But even outside of situations like that, sometimes this is just a really big, costless backup, essentially. For example, against like a board of Yukinas on Bang Dream, like if you play this and take music away, then like that's minus 2k to each of their Yukinas. Against some decks where they play like a global, like in the mirror here, for example, the Standby Fujimi decks play a character that gets plus 25 for each backstage character that's on trait, and they play a global 1500. So if you remove Fantasia Bunko trait from all your opponent's characters, they lose the 5,000 they're getting from the backstage, and they lose the 1500 global. So it's like a 6500 backup in every lane that had that character that was gaining power. So you can just use it as like really huge backups in some cases. A lot of times you'll see like early plays that gain power, like scaling to characters. So if your opponent ever does something where they play like multiple lanes that are gaining scaling power or conditional power, you can use this as like a backup for multiple lanes. So it has a lot of uses. Unfortunately, the downside, sort of holding it back a little bit, is that it is an event, meaning it's unsearchable by most things in the set. Notably, there's a card we'll get to in a minute that can grab it, but most searches can't grab this because it's not a character. At number 9, I have Journey to Find Relics of a Legendary Hero, Reiner and Ferris. So this is a level 0 with 2 effects. I'm going to go ahead and move on to this slide here. Because this card, it does actually have an error that is awaiting errata. I'm going to talk about all these cards as though they're going to be errata to what they do in the Japanese edition, because that's been the trend for a while now. Bushi C messes up and then fixes it, and everything is as it should be eventually, just with the wrong text printed on the cards. So the first effect is on play, pitch 1 to choose a Fantasia Bunko or Magic character in Clock, return it to hand, put top card of deck into Clock. So this is like the Mekon Brainstorm in Toloveru. I think is the biggest card really that sees that effect. And then on attack, look at top 2. Choose, it says up to 1 card from among them. It's supposed to be choose 1 card from among them. Put it on the top of your deck, put the rest into your waiting room. So the main thing that we're going to see with this Fujimi Fujimi Fantasia Bunko pushes an 8 standby deck fairly hard, and we'll see a lot of cards that go into it on this list. But in that 8 standby deck, this card has a lot of really cool applications where you can on play discard your standby target to hand fix, and then on attack, since you get to check top 2, you get to dig even deeper to trigger standbys. So it's kind of just a really cool synergy with that whole build. But even outside of the standby build, I don't think this. If it was only good in that build, I don't think I would have put it on this list. But in other decks, it does provide you with a costless discard out, which is something that a lot of the rest of the set doesn't have. So this is one way that you can just pitch extra climaxes. One of the main popular level 3 combos in this set is on a gate trigger. So you might often end up with extra climaxes in hand. This gives you a way to pitch them and not just have to turn down the gate trigger. And on attack, being able to choose your trigger or just like dig for plussing climax triggers does allow you to sort of just have a better control over the game state in general. So it's a card that it fits into every deck, really, but has a lot of cool synergies with the pushed 8 standby deck. So I really like this one. It's just a sort of filler utility level 0 that does just a wide variety of things for you. Number 8 is one of those standby cards, Girl of Healing Asha. So this is a global 1500. It's the one I was talking about when I was talking about the 2-0 counter. All your other Fantasia Bunko or Demon characters get plus 1500. So that is going to be everything in this set. Has a climax combo, which is notably continuous climax combo. If first friend is in your climax area, which is going to be this standby here, all of your characters get plus 1500 power. That includes itself, though that will rarely be relevant. But the reason it's relevant that it is continuous is that you can play the climax at level 2 and then standby out Asha into your backstage, and that plus 1500 will apply. So you'll be at global plus 3k for the turn. And then once the climax goes away, you'll just be back to the 1500. So it is just sort of the standby target assist equivalent for this set that you see in kind of every good standby deck. But notably, this one also heals and gives just a billion power. So it's nothing too super special, but being a healer means that you can justify playing a lot of extra copies of it, since you can just play it to heal. This deck has a pretty grindy endgame in its standby build, so you kind of just play 4 or play 3, and you're not specifically just trying to stand by them out into the backstage. You might actually hard play these at level 3 to get heals or something like that. So it's slot efficient. It performs the roles of making your guys beefy and extending the end game. And I, as people have probably figured out, I really like slot efficient cards like this. So this one gets a pass from me. Notably as well, with the like 3k power, like if you have 2 of these on board, you're plus 6,000 to your whole stage when you have the climax in play. So you're probably winning on offense. And winning on offense is really good in this deck because it lets you get counter steps on your opponent's turn, as long as your opponent can't bounce your characters back to hand. And counter steps, this no coming in between here is the minus soul counter I was talking about. So it helps you guarantee that you live to get counter steps and be able to minus soul counter your opponent, which is the main way that the standby deck is going to be just sort of extending the end game until it can win. The 2-2 that you see here is your main like target that you're buffing with Asha. It's the 2-2-65 plus 2500 for each other character in the backstage. So it's an 11-5. It's pretty much just the biggest 2-2 in the game. It doesn't have Encore, but that doesn't matter if it doesn't die. So with Asha in play, with a single Asha, it's 13k. The climax makes it 14-5 on offense. So you can kind of just like steamroll early plays with it. Like, even if you don't have Asha in play, you're 11-5, so you kind of get to just bully a lot of things. And it's pretty hard for them to beat you back. So yeah, Asha, great card. Number 7, we have A Nation Unified by Force, Nobuna. This card is something that we'll see probably a little more of in the future of this kind of profile. I know we've got at least one more set on the way that has this profile. Um, the on play or the during your turn plus 1k is kind of just extra text on there for whatever reason. It's welcome text because it means you kill 2ks and don't tie with them. But the main thing we're playing this for is the auto effect, the second effect. When this card is placed on the stage from your hand, you may pay 3. If you do, put all your opponent's stock into your opponent's waiting room. Your opponent puts the same number of cards from the top of his or her deck into the stock. Hey, that's Buns for Luck. It costs 3, but it's a character. And normally, in the past, when they've printed this on a character, it's been on a level 3, such as a Present for You, Eliasa. Which that one costs 3 in total. It costs 2 to play the character and then 1 to use the effect. So now we're just putting that 3 stock all into the effect. Which in general is going to be better. Obviously being a character is better than being an event, because it means it is searchable. So you can grab this off of comeback triggers, you can grab this off of whatever like events you have that salvage, or whatever climax combo grabs you a character. You can use any of that stuff to search for this Nobuna when you need it. Which events, like Buns for Luck and Seizure of Private Property, you tend to have to hold in your hand until you hit the point that you need them. So that gives you a bit more leeway with this, but also being a level 0 character that costs 0, more specifically, it's not a dead card if you just draw it and don't need the stock swap effect. You can just play it as a costless beater. So it's going to have maybe not a whole lot of importance throughout the game, but if you draw it when it's not important, it's not a dead card. And that's something that a lot of these sort of situational blowout effect cards struggle with, especially like anti-damage counters, stock swaps, things like that. When you don't need them, they're really bad, because they're just dead cards in your hand. And this never really hits that point. So it's always at least a costless character you can play, and sometimes it's the stock swap that wins you the game, because your opponent had like 3 climaxes and 6 cards or something. Yeah, so, and she's cute. Good card. Number 6, also from the same series, we have Frail Exorcist Hanbay. So this is a global 500 during your turn. Again, very rarely relevant text, but we're not going to complain about it being there, especially since this is mostly going to sit in the backstage. Second effect does need an errata as well. It's put the top card of your deck into your clock. When your climax is placed on your climax area, you may pay the cost. If you do, look up to 4 cards from the top of your deck. Choose up to 1 level 1 or higher card, it's supposed to say, instead of character. From among them, reveal it to your opponent, put it into your hand, and put the rest into your waiting room. So since this is supposed to say card, it is supposed to be able to grab events. Meaning you can grab the minus soul counter off of this, and you can grab the 2-0 counter that I showed first off of this. The main thing this draws, or sort of reminds us of, is Sister Font of her brother Lifa, which anyone that's played Sword Art knows how amazing that card is. Obviously we don't have the 1k act pump, so this one's not as good defensively, but 500 global on offense is still pretty decent. And the big difference here is that Lifa costs 1 stock, whereas Hanbay clocks us. And this has both benefits and drawbacks. The drawback, obviously, is that throughout the game you keep getting more stock pretty regularly, but it's a lot more expensive to be clocking yourself. Because you're not just, like, healing regularly, or at least this deck does want to be healing a lot, but when you're clocking yourself, you kind of counteract that healing. So it's not something you can really just, like, spam as much as you might use Lifa. But at the same time, Hanbay can be used on turn 1 when you don't have any stock. In a deck that plays a lot of costed characters, it's just more resource efficient, because you're not... you never have to worry about the scenario where you go, okay, I've hit level 1, I have 2 stock, and I need to like play a 1/1 from my hand and brainstorm, or use some act ability, right? And then you don't have the stock when you're playing your climax to actually use the Lifa. I run into that a lot with Sword Art, where I might hit level 1 with 2 stock and go, okay, well, I've got my 1/1 Silica and I've got my on-stage Silica, and then I don't have the stock to use Lifa. But with Hanbay, you'll always that'll never actually be an issue. And similar to how Fate uses the Shiro Clock Encore to sort of control the pace of level 0, where it can always control, like, I'm gonna hit level 0 first if it wants to. You can use the Hanbay to sort of do that. In Fujimi, it's a little less controllable, but you still get the ability to clock yourself and speed yourself to level 1, which you'll see this card a lot in the standby decks. I'm going to talk about the standby deck a lot, but and in the standby deck, you kind of want to hit level 1 first to get your level 2 walls onto the board before you, because they're the biggest part of your entire game, right? They're 11/5s. No level 1 game that sees a whole lot of play can beat that. So if you can hit level 1 first and get your 2/2s down, then no matter what your opponent's playing, their level 1 game is just screwed. They're not getting through. So that's one thing you might see people talk about a lot with this card, is that you can guarantee, you can go, oh, I'm at 0/5, clock to 0/6, play the standby, use Hanbay, clock myself to level 1, check top 4, grab a character, mill some more standby targets into my waiting room, and then since I'm level 1 now off of cost, I'll standby out the 2/2. And that is a powerful line of play. But at the same time, standby decks don't have Global Soul, so clocking yourself is a little harder to manage in those decks. But even in like the regular, more traditional decks with like plussing combo at level 1 into finisher with like 1k1s and all, it just gives you control over 0. It gives you non-stock costed plussing. You can make yourself hit level 1 first to get reverse targets easily or whatever for like Mafuyu combo. So it just does a lot of good things. It does a lot of control things, in just terms of like game control, and it doesn't really cost you much resources. You just have to be careful. The 1k1 decks can generally afford to use this a little more because they're pushing more damage, so they can keep up with it. But good card. Number 5, I have Diva of Temptation Miku. So this is a 1/1. And I actually don't have any other cards posted on the play. This is just one slide. Because, my lord, they basically just took a bunch of effects that see play, a bunch of act effects, and slapped them onto one card. And we see this every now and then. Like, Haruhi has a promo that's like, I think it has like power, salvage, and damage as its 3 modes. That's in a bad set, but this one kind of reminds me a lot of that. It has rest itself to give 2500, which is basically the biggest self-tap rest in the game. It's like the 2/1 Armin, just minus the hexproof part. So that's real neat. You can pump a lot of power. It sort of fits in with the whole, we want to win and get counter steps so we can play our minus soul counter. Which, again, this is a card that it's a 1/1. You'll see it in the standby builds. Especially since they don't really need it until late game, they can just standby it out off of a random standby trigger they hit. The second mode is probably the least useful. You discard a card and rest this to choose a cost of 0 or lower on your opponent's center stage and put it on the bottom of the deck. Main thing I would see you doing with this is bottom decking like bombs so that you can attack through them safely. Like Fate's bombs or like Love Life Sunshine Chica bombs if they get to attack and survive. And you don't want to like crash your 1/1 into them, you could bottom them. You can bottom like Aaron 1/0 instead of letting him bounce back to hand so that they can't loop combo, but they probably still got their maneuver gear, so I don't actually know how good that is. It's probably not amazing at the cost of a card from your own hand. But the third mode's very relevant. Whenever you're not pumping power, you're probably using third mode. Pay 2, rest this card to heal. It might not seem super good, but in the context of a standby deck, you really don't want to keep playing healers. It's kind of expensive to, like, your goal is to win board. And if your board wins, you don't want to be overplaying your like 11/5 Tominoris with 10k healers. That just feels really bad. You're lowering your power and spending resources on a lane that was already alive anyway, just to get a heal. So Miku allows us to just sit this thing in the backstage, and even though we win board, we can just pay cost and heal, and not have to worry about like turning over our characters on stage. Which just makes the deck, it allows you to keep a lot more hand, which means you can hold more counters, you can hold stuff, mainly counters. You can hold more counters, you can hold more utility. You can hold brainstorms for if your deck state gets bad and you need to like play a brainstorm over your Asha, brainstorm a little bit, and then play a standby to get your Asha back out. It just means you have a lot more leeway to work with stuff like that. You don't have to constantly be playing new characters over old ones. Also, since your board tends to live, you don't really have ways to recycle your healers once you play them the first time too well. So this means that once you've already established a bunch of healers or used the healers that were on their own characters, now you get to use this to just keep healing. There's also another level 3 that we'll see in a minute that really wants a bunch of copies of itself on stage. This is good with that because you don't. When you want to be playing 3 of a non-healer, this just gives you more. This gives you heals that you can use over a couple of turns without having to sacrifice like finisher slots to a healer. So this just gives us a lot of diversity, a lot of modes, and at least 2 of the modes are really good for us. Even in the decks that aren't the standby deck, if you're playing like the Mafuyu level 1 combo that has to reverse, resting to give 2500 is really big in guaranteeing a reverse. That makes your Mafuyu 95 in its first lane, and then her own effect pumps power, so you can chain 95s, which is really good for beating over decks like Goblin Slayer and whatever other standby decks you might be playing against. So overall, I think this is actually just a really good card that fits into a lot of builds, despite being a 1-1, which you usually don't see in a lot of decks. Number 4, we have one of the box topper promos. This is Maids of Temptation, Origami and Kurumi. So this is another Data Live card. This one has a big cost on the second effect, but it's a healer. It is a healer. The second effect is a restand effect, and it needs an errata, as do a lot of cards in this set. They have printed it as when this card attacks, pay 5, discard 2, stand. It is supposed to be at the end of this card's attack, which is huge. If it was when this card attacks, then if you lose battle, you basically lose your stand after you've paid cost. At the end of the attack, even if you got reversed, you are able to pay the cost and stand to attack again, which makes this card very much better. Very much better. It's similar in that it's a non-climax restander to like the trial deck restanders we've seen or the caster from Fate. It's higher cost because, again, it doesn't have to reverse, it's just at end of battle. So it's literally the freest restand ever. It's just expensive. But it does heal, which gives it a slot in a lot of decks that wouldn't really care for a finisher that's this expensive otherwise. You get to play it in the standby deck just because it heals, and that's what that deck wants to do. So you have another 10k healer that's just more heal slots, and sometimes it also gives you a way to kill your opponent if you need it. So it's really good. Again, slot efficiency. It's a big thing that I look for in a lot of cards. This is, and in this set especially, a lot of your heals in this set are tied to climax combos. And you obviously aren't playing more than one of those climax combos, and you might not be playing any of them. So this gives you a healer that is not tied to a climax combo, and can go past your 4 copies of Rumia. That actually does something. It actually has text on it. And it's really good text. It's very, I wouldn't say difficult to interact with, because like anti-damage is still going to hit this. If your opponent has like a memory kick effect, and you crash into them, you're going to go to memory and not get to stand. But it doesn't really matter if you're playing against like, I don't know, a deck where you have to direct attack on Titan. Like, they can't move gear to stop you. Bunny Girl Senpai can't stop you with like Futaba. They're gonna burn you, but you still get to stand. You still get to push them. So overall, it's just a really good, unconditional, climaxless finisher that's tied to a healer, which is really what this deck wants to do, is heal a lot, generally. Number 3, we have another Kermie card from Data Live. This is Insane and Beautiful Nightmare Kermie. The first effect is the one that needs the errata here. It says when this card is placed on the stage from your hand, it's supposed to say from hand or deck. You may pay 1. If you do, search your deck for up to 1 copy of this card, put it on any position of your stage, and shuffle your deck. When this is able to also trigger from deck, you can go like play a Kermie, pay 1, search a Kermie, effect, pay 1, search a Kermie. And now you've thinned your deck 2 cards and filled your board for 4 stock, which is efficient. And stock efficiency means that we can play the minus soul counter more easily. Or we can play healers more easily. Or we can use the 1/1 Miku to pay 2 rest and heal, because our whole center stage is Kurumis, and we don't have room for a healer. Yeah. So that's pretty neat. It also has a climax combo on a gate trigger. The climax combo is basically a combination of these 2 cards from Idolmaster Cinderella Girls. So maybe Kermie was an idol all along. We don't know. It has 2 modes. It's very strange, because the 2 modes, and this is sort of a theme with the Kermie cards, are based on how many cards are in your clock. So if you have 2 or less cards in your clock, when it attacks, you choose a card in your waiting room, any card, return it to your deck, shuffle. Usually you're going to be returning a climax here, so that you're already not close to dying, and now you're sort of getting even further away from dying. If you have 3 or more cards in your clock, you put the bottom 4 cards of your opponent's deck into the waiting room, deal X damage to your opponent, gain 3k, X is the number of climaxes you mill. This is the first time in English we've gotten one that moves from the bottom of your opponent's deck. Generally we get, like, put the top 5 cards of your own deck into the waiting room. But Japan has a number of cards that use the bottom of the opponent's deck. This is the first one we've seen in English. It kind of punishes compression. And it especially punishes, like, small deck states. Your opponent is very disincentivized to, like, oh, I'm ending my turn with like a 2-card deck that has a climax, so I'm guaranteed to cancel and then go into my next deck. Nope. Now you are going to take at least 1 damage and not get that cancel. So it disincentivizes stuff like that, which puts them in a little bit of a more random state on like fresh decks. So yeah, it's a decent finisher. It's a little inconsistent for a number of reasons. 1 being you might not mill climaxes. 2 being, it's kind of hard to control how many cards are in your clock. Data Live is getting its own set in Japanese, and I have a very strong feeling that we'll get it in English eventually, but I would also expect that that's like looking at early 2021, so we don't really have those cards to work with right now. That set has ways to control your clock. Here we don't. Our only way to control how many cards are in our clock is using, like, the Hanbay level 0 that I showed to clock ourselves when we play our climax, to put more cards in our clock, or playing healers to have less cards in our clock. Which is why I like the Miku 1/1 with this, because you can play 3 of these and you have the Miku to, like, heal if you need to. And you can play, like, the Restander and the Rumia. You're able to just sort of like jam some healers because your triple finisher only costs 4 stock, and the finisher itself doesn't cost any stock. So that's pretty solid. And it does, being so stock efficient, if you don't need to heal a whole bunch, lets you hold up stock for this card. So this is the 3/4 event counter. No coming in between. This is huge. It's kind of anti-damage. It's choose up to 2 of your opponent's characters, and those characters get -2 soul until end of turn. Put this card into your memory. You get memory compression. It's a little less relevant when you're getting memory compression at level 3, because like you don't have a whole lot of like deck cycles left to abuse that with. Like you might not even refresh after you use this. So memory compression is kind of whatever. I think it's more just so you can't loop this card forever. You only have a limited number of times to use it. But it's kind of anti-damage. A lot of level 3s have climax combos, and they're going to be playing global soul climaxes, so you're going to be swinging for 3. So minus 2 soul doesn't stop their damage. But at the same time, taking 1, especially if you're in a deck state where you know that like 3 is likely to just stick and kill you, taking 1 is a lot safer than taking 3. You can just heal that 1 off next turn, it's fine. If the 3 sticks, you're in a really bad spot. And if you think you're going to cancel the 3, just don't play the stupid counter. Cancel it. Save the counter for next turn when you've used all your cancels. It just gives you a really good way to grind out the end game. Especially if you like have been playing in the standby deck, for example. You're going to be winning board a lot, which means your opponent is probably going to have to be expending a lot of their resources just to keep good characters coming on board. And if that's the case, they might not be able to play a climax at level 3. If they can't play a climax at level 3, then you kind of just blank all their damage with this. You only have to worry about canceling 1 lane. So that's really strong. It's a card that you kind of just want to hold in your hand. Play your healers normally. As long as you go into your attack phase with 1 stock, you'll get up to 4, and then you'll have enough to play this. So you do kind of have to be like, 4 is a lot. So you kind of have to watch your resources. You can't just sort of throw cards out willy-nilly. You have to know when you want to use this and make sure you have the resources for it. But overall, it's a strong card that can, like... Siege saw play, Emilia saw play. Emilia saw a good bit of play. Priestess hasn't seen any play so in tournaments yet, thanks COVID. But Priestess is super hyped up, like, as huge minus soul. And this is basically just resolving those combos, right? Especially like double Siege or double Emilia. Priestess is a little more efficient, but it's the same general idea, where you're just trying to blank out damage. Obviously it's weaker at level 3 than it is at level 2, which is where a lot of these cards shine. But it's the same general idea, and it's really just as strong here. And this one doesn't like require you to dedicate... Whoop, that's not what I meant to do. It's not something that like requires you to dedicate climaxes or anything like that. And it's an event, so it's hard to search, but Hanbay can grab it, and you can hold it. So you're good. And as I've said with both of these cards, they give you a lot of power to push through and win and have counter steps. So you get counter step for this counter. I've kind of just described the entire standby deck this entire time, but yes, it's got a lot of good cards in it. Number 1, this card goes in every deck, I promise. I promise. At least every deck that can fit blue. Most decks want to fit blue, specifically for this card. Even the standby deck, especially the standby deck. This is an early play. This is an early play that is Happy Christmas Saya and Don't Stop Keep Going Ran and Limiter Removal all combined into 1 card. Yes, you heard me. If you have 4 or more characters, it gets -1 level in your hand. Very easy early play condition. Hard to play multiples of them efficiently, but very easy early play condition. Especially in a deck like a standby deck where you're winning board. Or even in the other decks where you just have a bunch of costless characters and you're like, cool, here's my 1-0, here's my other 1-0, now I'm healing. Guaranteed. Yeah, it heals. To memory. Memory compression is really cool. Memory compression can't be stock swapped away. Japan has realized this recently. They're playing like 20 memory cards in some of their decks. Unfortunately, we can't do that here. Fujimi doesn't have that many memory cards. But every little bit counts. And we'd probably play this card even if it didn't heal to memory, but it does heal to memory. So you kind of also just beat Kantai too, because you screw anti-heal. But it's just really solid. You also never accidentally heal your color off with this, really, because you get to choose which card you send to memory. That also means you can't like clock a climax and heal it off, which there's trade-offs. But yeah, you get to play this at level 2, and then assuming you play like 2 of these and get 2 cards in memory, that's like a little bit more compression going into your level 3 deck. The third effect is the cool one here. On play, pay 1, discard 2. choose one of your other characters, and that character gets plus X power until end of turn. X is equal to that character's power. We're out here doubling powers. So say you have Tomonori, right? It's 11.5. And we'll say you have the Asha Global, so it's actually a 13k. You play this Rumia, you pay 1, discard 2. Now that Tomonori is a 26,000 power monstrosity. Goodbye, Futaba. This deck does actually have bounce on one of its uncommon level 3s, and that generally sees play. But this also just lets you remove literally anything you want. It's a little expensive, but at least it's expensive in hand, not stock, so we're kind of balancing out our resources there. But yeah, like, if your opponent's playing Bunny Girl and they have Futaba, just delete it with whatever, really whatever you want. Like, if you have anything that's 10k and then Asha on board, they can't counter over that once you double its power. If you're playing against some other standby deck and you kind of just want to kill one of their threats, not threats, but like wall characters that's really big, and without worrying about them countering over it, you can do that. You can just kill whatever you want. If you early play this and your opponent has like, I don't know, I wanted to say yo early play, but they're just going to con on field encore that. I'm trying to think of like a good big early play. I don't know, you could say like Priestess, right? And you really just want to make sure you kill their Priestess, and they have like 2k assist or whatever, and the global 1k, so their Priestess is like, what, 12, 10-5, 12-5, 13-5, and they could have a counter. And you just really want to get rid of it. You don't want it sticking around. Guess what? You have a way to do that. Tie it into a card that you probably would have played anyway. Slot Efficiency. Yeah. It's just a good card. Like, you're almost never going to use the power effect, but it's there. Sometimes you do. Usually you're just healing to memory, though, because that's really good. You're only 9k. You're only 9k, but if you're playing this in a deck with, like, the Asha Global, you can stand by that out and go to 10-5. You get to attack for 12 that turn. So, like, you're not even losing on offense, probably. There's 2k to level 3 assists in the set that you can play. There's level assists. There's a bunch of stuff. Like, the power is not really an issue for this card. Even if you let it die on defense and you just use the 1/1 Miku to pump it, right? So yeah, overall, this card is really solid. I don't think it's actually, like, in my #1 spot because it's broken. It's just by far the best healer this set has access to, and probably one of the best early play healers in the game. So that's why it's at my #1 slot, like, just because every deck wants this card. Every deck almost wants 4 copies of this card. Just because it's so good at being an early play and so good at healing. So yeah. Really cool card. Recap of my top 10 cards. Which, funnily enough, like, literally all of these can go in the standby deck. That's actually fun. I didn't even realize that when I was making this. This is kind of just like the standby deck in a nutshell. Pile of good cards. But, well, okay, the Kermie level 3 does not go in there. But like I said, like, a lot of these cards have uses in other decks too. They're all just very generically good cards. Yeah, except the Asha. The Asha kind of wants to be in the standby deck really bad. Tier list wise, I think this is an A tier deck. Sort of fits in with the same theme as the rest of the A tier decks, where you're field based. Which, being field based doesn't always win you the game. Sometimes you just take damage anyway. Sometimes decks just generate card advantage too efficiently for you, right? And even though you're grinding their board down, they're just replacing their cards all the time. Sometimes you're trying to win board and they say, ha, my character returns your character to hand. Then you feel like a big fat dummy. Or your opponent's playing Demonic Sword Graham or something, and all of a sudden you can't stop them. So there's... Field-based decks have just sort of an inherent weakness to interaction. And I think that's what keeps it in A tier. It's definitely the grindiest deck in the game. It's definitely the highest power standby deck in the game. So if you're really just itching to play standby, This is the go-to, I believe. Whereas previously it was probably Bunny Girl or Goblin Slayer. I think those decks have their own draws, but it's no longer being a big standby deck. That is no longer the draw. And Fujimi has some other builds. Like I said, I'm going to have my sample deck video out next week-ish, early next week, into the weekend. And I'm going to talk about a lot of decks that play a lot of cards that I didn't talk about today. Because I think they're good cards, they're just a lot more niche, and they fill very specific roles and have synergy with each other. So this set can do a lot of things. And I think they definitely justify the A tier placement. I think also Gun Gale, which I think Gun Gale, especially with this set coming out, is losing a lot of its footing as a level 2 deck. It pretty much is like the easiest triple early play deck in the game, and that's sort of what's kept it in A tier so long. But its early plays are getting less and less relevant when decks can play 2 to 11 5s for free at level 1. They struggle to win board against stuff like this. But I think the one thing keeping it there still is that it has a level 1 combo and a level 1 bomb, which is pretty good against standby decks, because they usually play 1/1s. It's even good against stuff like Goblin Slayer, where they have a 1/0 that they really want to keep alive, which is why they play the 1k global. They play counters. And when you can just bomb stuff like that, you slow down a lot of other decks, and you still have your triple early play thing. But I think this deck does a lot to push Gun Gale down the ladder. So we might be seeing Gun Gale fall off of A tier fairly soon. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed, got a little bit of insight out of this. Hopefully I'll be able to provide a lot more next video when I give some deck lists. Because, funnily enough, the standby deck is not actually the deck that excites me the most out of this set. It just happens to feature all the good cards. So, yeah, thank you guys for watching. I've probably been rambling very long. I forgot how to make a video in the 2 months that we didn't get a set released during COVID. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Check me out on Twitter. Check out the global community on Facebook. Check out the Discords. Check out my store on TCG Player. We have Fujimi singles already up. They might have sold already, I don't know. They're up for pre-sale if it's not Friday. They're up for regular sale if it is Friday. We'll ship them out ASAP. Check it out. Yeah, thank you. I'll see you guys next time.